Are we all sitting comfortably? I declare this Nettleham Parish Council meeting open for the, what's the date today? 23rd of April. So, prior to the start of the meeting, we usually have a public forum. If there are any members of the public that would like to make any comments to the Parish Council about any particular issues around the village, then this is your opportunity to do so. If there are any issues on the agenda that you'd like to talk to, then if you wish, if you mention it now, we can defer your question until it comes to that relevant point in the meeting. But if there are any general points you'd like to raise? No? Okay. Right, so we'll move on then to reports from our county and district councillors. We appear not to have any district councillors with us.
Andrew is coming, but she's at a prior meeting. So.
Right, and Giles is also not available.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm afraid it's just down to Jackie.
I'm sorry, I didn't do a report this time because Richard Davis was coming and it would be essentially the same stuff. But there were one or two other things I wanted to raise in relation to highways. I've had a lot of concern and a lot of complaints, as you know, about Mill Lane and about the dangers of the parking there. And there's been toing and froing over some months now. Can we have double yellow lines? Can we have them up the hills? That sort of thing. But only this week has somebody thought to tell me that, in fact, if we want to have double yellow lines there, we have to write in and ask for a public consultation on the matter, and it can take about 9 months. It isn't that they have to put a road traffic order in place. They haven't been doing them because there is only one person in the whole county to deal with it. But if we want it, it would be worth us putting in for it now. I did also have a request for double yellow lines along Vicarage Lane, but that was rejected by the officer who looked at it because of the effect on the village and because of the way that part of the road is used. But when it came to the corner and opposite Vicarage Lane and on Mill Hill, there would be a possibility of getting some lining there, but we'd need to get the process started. In addition, there was a highways meeting today. I went, and those meetings are always interesting, and it's always worth going online to have a look at the papers. You get the same papers that the councillors get. And agenda item 6, which deals with additional highways funding, that's what it was meant to be about. It was written by Paul Rusted, who's in charge. He's the Infrastructure Commissioner, and he had the good sense to put in place explanations of all these different types of road repairs. It's on page 67 to 70. It's very easy reading and it's really interesting, and if you take the time to read it, you really understand why there are road failures. It's almost good enough to put up in the different village magazines, bits and pieces of it. So I would encourage you to have a look at agenda item 6, page 67. And that's it, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much.
Short and sweet today.
Any questions of Jackie?
No, just a comment, Chair, to reaffirm what you were saying about traffic regulation orders, and it will take at least 9 months. If you look at the village centre scheme, it took something best part of 18 months, 2 years altogether with the consultations, because you then have to deal with objections and the like. And if the Parish Council do think that ought to be requested, well, they do need to think about that. Yeah. It has knock-ons elsewhere. Okay. I'm not suggesting we debate it now. It should be an agenda item.
Malcolm.
I'm not convinced, Chairman, that in fact in 2 years' time, which is the sort of realistic time frame, Mill Hill will be the worst place in Nettleham. I can think of others that perhaps we should be looking at first. I think this is a relatively short-term problem due to the building work on there, and to do something 2 or 3 years after it, there's perhaps better examples of places in Nettleham where we could do with more management.
Terry.
Well, a point of order, Mr. Chairman. This has to be an agenda item.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
That's why I asked for it.
That I was going to say. I thought you might have had a question for Jackie.
No.
Okay. No, I was going to say we'll put this on the agenda for next month.
June.
Oh, June.
Thank you. Chairman.
Next month's a bit busy. Okay, thank you. Right. Well, we'll move on to the meeting proper then. Okay. Apologies from John Downs, Susan Harlan, and Giles McNeil.
Yes, that's right.
And Angela White will be a little late.
just need to resolve to accept
Can I have a resolution to accept that?
them.
Yeah, thank you. Right, pecuniary interests. Anybody got any pecuniaries to disclose? Yes, Terry.
I need to declare an interest in item 7F, Mr Chairman. I'm a trustee of the Lincolnshire River Trust, and I'm also chairman of a committee, the Witham Partnership of the Environment Agency.
Okay, but non-pecuniary.
No.
Okay, thank you. No others? Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to notes of the meeting held on the 20th of March, to be approved as the minutes. Are there any corrections to those notes? No? Can I have a
Move to be accepted.
second? Terry, favour? Yeah, thank you. Right, clerk's report.
Yeah, it's just a couple of items to mention. I've just passed it round. It is a little late. The General Data Protection Regulation, on the notes of the Personnel Standards Panel, it was suggested that an item on this matter be brought to this meeting. However, it's we're actually attending some training on Thursday to do with it, so we thought it's more prudent to actually bring it to the May meeting, where we'll have things in place. The other item is the festive market was agreed to. Rather than give the festive market free use of the old school, we'd actually give them a grant which equated to the amount of the booking. That amount was £300, so they've actually received a grant in that amount.
Okay, thank you. Right, item 5, financial matters, ratification of the accounts paid. Is everybody happy with the, any questions on the accounts? No? Okay, seconded? Yeah, okay. All in favour? Yeah. All in favour? Thank you. Right, agenda item 5B, to discuss the request by the Bowls Club for a grant towards urgent works on ditches and surrounds of Bowling Green. We've got in front of you a mighty tome from the Bowls Club with their normal sort of application plus their constitution and accounts and everything else. I don't think the Bowls Club have ever asked us for money before, have they?
Not in mine.
Not that I recall, anyway. Would anybody like to make any comments on that? Now,
Just briefly, compared to the football, tennis, and cricket club, the bowls club are almost anonymous, you know, when it comes to ground aid. You know, they are normally self-sufficient. I don't think the sort of figures they're talking about here we have in the accounts. Spare. They're asking for 1,000, aren't they?
well, they would be optimistically looking
Yeah.
for that sort of
I feel we should support them, but recognise that this is normally very much a self-sufficient club.
I believe it's some major works that they're undertaking. They've got a substantial grant promised, but they need some other match funding, and we would form part of that additional match funding. John?
Yes, I think they're relevant because in part D, where it says that the Constitution states that should the club fail in any way, the Parish Council will be offered the opportunity to take control of the green and pavilion for use for community sports. I can't imagine a situation where we wouldn't do that. So ultimately, we have an interest in that surviving and thriving. And I think their request is very modest compared to the support that's given to other sporting facilities in the village. I think people who really do look after themselves as well look after themselves, and ultimately we could have a responsibility, should be rewarded for that. This is the first time what's happened on the Parish Council and they've asked for any assistance at all from my memory. So I have no problem with what they've asked for actually.
That
No
will take the
Well, that's all of our budget.
I
for
realise
grants.
that. There's no way, I was going to ask the clerk, is there any way that we can help in any way other than by our budget item? Because I do think this is a very reasonable request, bearing in mind all
Well,
the
the only other way would be for it to be taken out of the general reserve. That's the only thing that we have.
I'd just like to know what other councillors think about it.
Terry?
Well, my view would be, Mr Chairman, that yes, we should seek to support them, but we have a budget of £1,000 for these donations. That budget is reviewed annually and has been set only a few weeks ago to start on the 1st of April. I would be totally against the idea of using reserves for this purpose, and therefore the highest figure I could personally support would be £500 out of the section 137.
Richard, did you?
I sort of saw a lot of it in the same way that John did in terms of wanting to support them. I was on a slight tangent. I was interested that they'd been given an offer of support from Biffa, because I'm sure I looked at that for play equipment from you when I did the thing. It said we didn't live in an eligible area, so I'll have to go back and look at that again. I also agree that we shouldn't be taking it out of reserves. So my thinking was not to fund the full amount, but a small amount. What I wasn't sure about was, are there any criteria?
It has to be commensurate within the amount of population that it will actually affect. That's the one thing I think.
So there's 50. It says 55.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as for
We don't know how many of those are actually Nettleham.
no.
I think it's safe. Yeah, I think it says that 55 members are in the parish council.
Oh, okay.
So,
So that's not a huge amount
No.
out of a population of about 4.5 million people.
But when you compare it against what the
Yeah.
Mulsanne Park
Exactly.
groups get,
That's my point.
yeah.
I totally agree, they should be supported, but I go along with Terry's comment that £500 should be maximum.
Janice, do you have any comment to make?
No, I would agree with that. It's we've already lost 300 for the festive market,
And
the
that's
other-
gone out of last year.
that was last year. I would support
So that's half of our grant budget.
500 and suggest they contact the district councillors for their initiative money.
Oh, that's a good thought.
Chairman, I'm happy to support what Terry said. I just wanted to explore the facility. I think we should.
So do we have a proposal? Oh, Malcolm, you want
I've only got to say that I gave them several thousand a few years ago from the district council.
to? Okay.
There are advice and support needn't always be financial.
Sorry, just to clarify, are there any criteria on who can apply to us for?
It had to be within the parish, and it has to be commensurate within.
Okay, so those are the.
Yeah,
And so this would be £500 of the year's.
yeah,
So half of the
Yeah.
year's grant money.
yeah.
So do I have a proposal for that?
I think Terry proposed one.
No, I didn't make
Oh,
a
you didn't?
proposal. What I said was I wouldn't support anything higher than 500.
Right. Or do we have an alternative proposal? We haven't got a proposal yet.
I feel in view of the fact that there's 55 people, residents, we have £1,000 to play with for the year. For a number of worthy organisations in the village, I would propose a figure of £250 for this.
Right. So I have a proposal for 250. Do I have a seconder? Terry. Okay. All those in favour of 250? Yep.
Is everybody?
Malcolm's not.
No, I'm abstaining because I think it's a little low.
So there's 7
Yeah.
Chairman, if we could include when we say that is a quarter of our budget,
Yes.
so that I don't want to slap them down.
No, no, absolutely.
I have already told them that the maximum we have is 1,000.
Yeah.
That's why they put 1,000 in. All right. So that's £250 to the bowls club. Right. Moving on then. Planning matters. Mike, are you standing in for John on this?
I'll run through them. 32 Deepdale Lane, you'll see, was a planning application for a single-storey extension of the garage on the front. We've objected to it, and you'll see the reasons why. Basically, the reason is that the garage is on the front of the property where none of the others are. It would mean an individual garage on the front of the property. Those comments have already gone in, I believe.
No, we haven't. I've got an extension on it. So.
Oh, fine, yeah. Well, so we'll seek approval for that. Ambrose House, 40 Lodge Lane. Again, seeking approval for the comments that are listed there, which are very, I mean, John has put an excellent objection towards these, I must say. And you'll see the reasons are all stated as it's against the neighbourhood plan. So we're seeking approval for those. There's an appeal gone in for the land at 24 Scotland Road, building plot which we confused, and the rest I think is basically all been granted.
Any questions of Mike on those?
So we're seeking approval really for 32 Deepdale Lane.
For all of them.
For all?
Sorry?
Seeking approval for all of them.
All of them?
Yeah. Richard?
It's the comments really that we...
There are a couple of things that I was going to suggest we add to the response about Ambrose House 40 Lodge Lane. The first was on the application form. Part 6 of it says that a new public right-of-way will be included within or adjacent to that plot of land, and then it refers to a diagram that shows this. The way that West Lindsey store their documents means that you can't find that diagram other than reading everything to try and find it. Eventually, when you do find it, there doesn't seem to be a new public right-of-way on it anyway. So I thought we should point out that they've said something that doesn't then appear to exist. The second is that I think the entrance to where that proposed development is outside 30-mile-an-hour speed limit of the village. So that would be a residential road exiting onto a 60-mile-an-hour stretch of Lodge Lane, which didn't seem very sensible to me. So I thought we should highlight that as well.
Okay. Is it possible to put that in?
Yeah, that's fine. The only comment I would make on the path, I think originally there was a footpath supposedly along from the rugby club, wasn't there?
That's right.
Never been taken up. Probably that's the one Mr. Tate's saying it'll continue, but there isn't a footpath there to continue.
No.
But they've never used.
It's a bit meaningless, really.
Yeah, yeah.
In the same section, I did wonder whether they were trying to talk about just a path next to a road, right? But in the same section of the form, there's a separate question about new pedestrian access, which is what I took that to be referring to. So then when it also said there was a public right of way in there, and I couldn't see it in the form.
Okay, thank you. All right, but subject to that, is everybody in favour?
All four.
Sorry?
All four.
All four of those planning responses. All in favour? Yeah, thank you.
Chair, just before we move on to planning, can I just share some information with councillors? It is relevant to planning and it is relevant to what we've been talking about on planning and their response and lack of response to information and requests from the parish council. I hope to speak to it at the next meeting in more detail, but I'm currently working with an officer of West Lindsey District Council who is revising and reviewing the West Lindsey District Council's policy with replying to all correspondence and issues with the District Council. I think it'd be worth looking at that because they're clearly nowhere near complying with those requirements, and I think what is needed there and hopefully will come about is an agreed standard with councillors as to what the authority is supposed to be doing, and thereafter a stringent monitoring of it at both councillor and officer level, because there's no doubt in my mind in their current relatively loose requirements they're not complying with that. With the new proposals, which I think are very good and very fair, I'm doing a sort of proofread as an external sort of person. I think it will, if it's adopted and it is supervised, it will resolve all the problems, it has the potential to resolve all the problems you find with non-replies.
That's very encouraging.
Correspondence. It will bring some discipline to the organisation.
Mike,
Could just make one final comment. Councillor Downs informs me, by the way, that planning applications of the future, we won't receive planning drawings from West Lindsey unless it's over, for anything over 10. So, in other words, we'll get them for small developments, but anything over 10, we're not going to get any drawings to look at.
I thought it was the other way around.
No, we're going to do over 10, but anything under 10.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
The other way around. What it means is it makes it extremely difficult for us to judge an application because we won't have the relevant information unless we actually go and pay for it. We take that to the website and blow up because you can't scale up or anything.
Well, I think that was actually said some year or two back, wasn't it, when they first started their
It was when they first started. They weren't going to give us any in the first instance at all. But now, I mean, John's made the point what's the point of us being a consultee if we can't have the information to consult them? You know, what's the point? So, West
Chairman.
Lindsay again, a very remiss in there.
There is a reason for it, that there were a few old machines at West Lindsay that were getting past it, that were costing a lot of money to repair and keep running, that produced these large plants. That's one of the reasons they cut down the use of them to as little as possible. And sooner or later they're going to go, and then there won't be any means of producing them at.
Yeah, it makes it difficult for us to actually assess.
I agree, but
plans.
that is the reason behind it.
Okay, thank you. What is? Do you have a proposal of what we do about that?
No, well, I don't think it's anything. It's just to inform you of what's happening, because
Okay.
I think it's grossly unfair if they expect us as the council to decide planning applications if we don't have a drawing in front of us. And there's no excuse, Malcolm, saying that they
I
haven't
didn't
printed.
put it in an excuse. I gave it purely as the reason why they
Well,
cut back on it.
I don't think legally they've got a reason that they can't give you a drawing that you can't
No
read.
reason at all.
Okay. Well,
I'm not disagreeing with you,
No.
but
we have
that's why it was cut back.
Okay. Do you want to say anything about appeals, consents?
Sorry?
Do you want to say anything about the appeals, consents, and refusals?
Well, just we've got so many here.
We have. I just wondered if there's any in particular that you could update us on that will.
No, I don't think there is
Okay.
actually, because John just gave me those to outline to you.
Right. Okay.
The rest of them, he said, was more or less settled.
Tree applications? No. Update on current outstanding planning matters we've covered.
Yeah.
So it's 106 agreement requirements. I think this was relation to the fact that lack of consultation on
Yes.
106
Yeah.
agreements when plans are being considered. I think what it comes down to, from my understanding, is that what we need to do is make very fulsome statements within our comments as to what we would expect in a 106 agreement, rather than leave it up to the officers to decide what they think is most appropriate. I think we need to make a clear statement
Absolutely.
in all our responses.
Yeah, I think we realise that's where we failed in this case, where we should have been more precise in the comments at the early stages.
Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll have picked up an email that I sent on this 2 or 3 weeks ago, to the effect that I think that the council should ask to be a party to a Section 106 agreement in future. I take Councillor Siddle's point that we haven't got any on the horizon, but nevertheless, the reality is there will be some in the fullness of time. And when we come to that position, I think we should get our marker down very firmly,
Yes.
that we should be made a party. That has 2 big advantages for the Parish Council. One is that we have control over what goes into it, and secondly, we're in a position to enforce it without having to rely on the planning authority, who haven't got an exactly brilliant record when it comes to enforcement. I must point out to the Council that there are 2 disadvantages of being asked to be made a party to a Section 106 agreement, and so you've got to weigh it up. One of the disadvantages, of course, is that it will mean extra work for the office and perhaps the chairman of the planning liaison, in that they will have to liaise more closely with the people who draw up the Section 106 agreement. There's also the question of legal costs. Before we sign up to a legal document, it has to be vetted by somebody. I won't always be around, so you have to think about the implications of legal costs. But in my view, my recommendation to the council is that despite those 2 disadvantages, I believe that the advantages significantly outweigh those, and I think we should press to be a party.
Anybody want to make a comment about that?
Yes,
No.
I think this is an excellent idea to be done when we review the local plan. Make this a condition of the local plan. Any new development, Parish Council would be a party to.
Well, the question is there anything stopping us writing to the head of planning at West Lindsey and saying in future developments, could the parish council be considered to be a party?
Absolutely none, and I think that's a way of approaching it. But I'm saying if we want
We could do that with the neighbourhood plan as well.
if it was in the neighbourhood plan, which we hope West Lindsey would approve it after the review,
Yeah.
it would be there in front of them.
Okay.
It's just a belt and braces.
Any other comments on that? Richard?
Just two things. One is, are we sure that there's no obligation on West Lindsey to ask us if we want to be a party to a section 106? Is it? It's down to us to lobby
No,
for it.
just
They
as-
don't have to.
We're
they
just a
don't have to
statutory
consult us in-
consultee, that's all. So, I think I've almost got a proposal from Terry.
Well, it's
That-
recommendation to the council.
Okay, I propose then, on Terry's recommendation, that we write to the head of planning, West Lindsey, and request that we are considered to be a party to future 106 agreements for the parish of Nettleham. Second?
With a copy to Mark Sturgis.
Right, to head of planning at West Lindsey to request
That we are
party to
any future S106 agreements
Chairman, with a copy to Mark Sturgis.
with a copy to Mark
Thought
Sturgis.
Mark was head of planning.
No, not these days. He's
What he
Rachel
was.
Hughes is the section 106 officer.
yeah. Oliver Fitch-Taylor's the head of planning.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favour? Okay,
So it's
unanimous. Thank you. Right, moving on.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Richard.
Can we talk about that specific section 106 agreement and following up the question of the cycle path?
Yes.
So everyone will have seen the emails about the situation with that bit of cycle track not being seemingly part of the section 106 agreement, but for the other parts of the cycle track being made part of the section 106 agreement. So I would like us to write to West Lindsey to ask if, have we correctly understood that that's the case, and if so, are they going to do anything about it? Because it doesn't seem much point ensuring that there's going to be a cycle track halfway between Nettleham and Sudbrook. It needs to be the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think we should press them further on that rather than just now that we think we've understood what the situation is. I think we need to follow that up.
I think the answer will come back. We've not got the money. The developer's not putting it in. We're not putting it in.
But it's the same developer that has got a section 106 agreement to build the other half of it.
Yeah, but not the bit in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought the bit along Sudbrook Lane had been left out. There wasn't on the planning application that first went in for 72 behind 72 Scotland Road. There was no link envisaged to Sudbrook.
There is. There's a document there which shows the cycle track going from the bottom of the Anglian Water track
Yeah.
to the Nettleham Parish boundary. And the other application from the same developer, which does have a section 106 obligation to
Yes,
build
I
the
know
cycle
that.
track,
Yeah,
does the rest of it. Sudbrook.
and that was on the first one.
Well, I thought the different landowner in between, surely. They don't own the land to do that.
Mike.
Well, that's a private road anyway, isn't it?
The Anglian
It's
Water
Anglian
Road's
Water's
private.
own road, that one. So I don't see how Trulubs can give planning permission or ask for planning permission on a
No,
road.
not along the cycle track, from the bottom of it where it joins Sudbrook Lane, all the way to Sudbrook.
There's obviously a lot of confusion about this.
There
cycle
is.
track. And it would be nice if actually West Lindsey could put down in black and white exactly what the planning permission is that's been granted. Because I don't think any of us are really sure, because it's been messed about. I mean, I sat at the meeting with Trulub, and he wasn't aware that there was a cycleway going in at all. And then towards the end of the meeting, he said, oh, perhaps it might be a good idea if we did put one in. I think it would be nice to know exactly what they've granted in planning permission.
Well, I thought we got a definitive letter from planning, didn't we, on the subject?
No, we've not
Some
really had
months
I've
back.
not seen
no, we've not really had a proper response.
Chairman, could I make a suggestion?
Yes, John.
That we ask them for a plan that indicates the relevant sections and what pertains to them or doesn't. And we'll see clearly on the plan maybe if there is a section where there's nothing.
I mean,
And we'll
nothing
see,
else, you make the point.
and we'll see where it is.
Yeah, that sounds
Because at the
good.
moment we're just speculating and get
I would say ask our district councillors, both of them, if they could please expedite this and get this plan, because we don't seem to be getting responses. No, if we formally ask them,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
gives power to them.
Yeah. You're formally
Yeah,
asked.
I'm in on Wednesday.
Okay.
I will try and find the appropriate person.
Thank you.
And ask them.
Thank you very much.
So that's is that what everybody's in agreement with?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you want to say?
We're all in agreement. With,
Yeah, and then they've got the backing of the parish council, yeah.
yeah, but Angela will approach the planning office
At the request of the parish council.
at the request of the parish council.
I'll ring up tomorrow
get
and see if
clarification.
Rachel Hughes is in. She should be the person who's got all the
Right.
information.
Okay.
And you've got my summary of what I think the situation is.
Yes, thank you very much.
It would be helpful if I could reaffirm that they produce a plan.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yes,
Want a plan
we need a plan.
with which areas are covered by section 106,
Yeah,
so that we know what they think.
yes, it's a planning department.
Yeah.
We're well used to using
Yeah.
What they want is the parish council
Okay.
to step in and pay for it.
Well, that's more the point. Okay, we'll finish with that point then.
So is everybody in favour?
Everybody's in favour of that, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Seems a consensus. Okay. I think it's probably a good point in which Angela could hopefully give us any questions of Angela on her report. I think should be the issue.
What I was going to say was that after I'd sent it, I realised I'd forgotten to say something about my visit to Rysholme Hall. And so I inserted that and I sent it to Julia this afternoon. So I'll just read that bit if I can find it. I was invited to a breakfast meeting at the Rysholme campus by the University of Lincoln. There were 2 presentations on agroforestry. This involves planting trees and growing crops between them. Mr. Stephen Briggs had done this on his farm in Cambridgeshire. He's planted apple trees on 3-metre strips with crops in between. The system has been used in France and China. Mrs. Isabel Wright, who is from Lincoln University, is experimenting with this method in a field on the Rysholme estate. I think it's a field that borders the bypass. Other trees, such as walnut, can be used for longer-term investment, and another farmer has planted lines of trees in a field with sheep in it. The morning finished with a presentation by Miss Emma Bird of the Woodland Trust. She spends time advising farmers for whom she can obtain funding for tree planting. Obviously, protecting grown trees from animals such as sheep can be a problem. And a member of the audience who had planted walnut trees asked for advice on preventing squirrels from eating his crop. He said most of the advice he had found was in French. This did not surprise me, as we've driven along miles of walnut trees on our way to the Alps. It's just another way of farming, really, and there are all kinds of benefits to it. You get an extra crop, and the leaves go down, and they go into the soil, etc. They found, this is what they're doing it as a research project at Lincoln University. They found that with that method, the tree roots go more horizontally, they don't go down so deep, etc. But yeah, it looked really interesting actually. But
So
that's my only addition to it.
I take it there's been no changes since the days that or since they dropped the idea of building 180 houses
No,
at
they're
Rysholme.
going in a completely different direction
Right.
now.
So that's reassuring. It's going to
It's
be
going to
still
be
going to be an educational establishment.
I mean, yes, and I think she hopes to develop the hall. I mean, they've stopped having weddings there now because I think they need to do something to the roof of the hall. I mean, she wants to do certain work on that. I think they're developing as a rural park with all that sort of facilities. And if anything is built there, it'll probably be crafts units, something like that.
Oh, okay, good.
I mean, that's what she's suggesting to us first of all. And if there is any, she hasn't mentioned any residential development, but it will be nothing like, I'm sure it'll be nothing like what was suggested
Thank you.
before. They're going in a completely different direction.
Any other questions for Angela? No? Okay, thank you very much. Right, item 7. To approve the use of Bishop's Palace site for a 7 a.m. Pentecost service on behalf of the Nettleham Methodist Church. Anybody got any objections to that? No? All in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Item B, new member recruitment working party. basically, this is just a quick update on where we are. I sent out some emails this morning to everybody to give you a summary of what we're doing. And basically, we've had quite a bit of brain crunching on ideas for letting residents know the sort of things that the parish council does over the coming year, and also why we stood as parish councillors, what we've got out of it, and effectively trying to encourage members of the public to become parish councillors. It's not as scary as it looks, honestly. We were all novices once as well, but we're keen, obviously, we're aware that we're going to be losing a few members at the end of this year, and we want to keep the numbers up. We want it to be a proper representation of the community. So it's very keen that we keep that information out there. So you've got an agenda or a schedule of things that we're planning to do. That's public engagement at the carnival, at the festive fair, and articles in Nettleham News, in Nettleham Matters, and any other Facebook related or other media related organ that we can reach the residents. Okay, any questions on that? Terry?
Mr. Chairman, I gave notice I'd like
You
to
did,
speak.
sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, the reason I want to speak on this, Chairman, is that I wasn't at the February meeting when this was first discussed, so I feel I need to have some input into the process at an early stage, if I may. I read the notes with great interest, and can I say without any hesitation, I fully support the campaign to find new people to join the parish council. And I can also say that I'm very happy to write an article as one of the people that will write these articles. But I do think it's important, Chairman, right at the outset, that we set some objectives for what we're trying to achieve here. Before we get down into the sort of detail of who's going to write what sort of dates, I think it's important that we have some sort of idea of what we're trying to achieve. Now, I believe that there are 4 objectives here. I'd like to put them forward for discussion within the council. The first is that the objective is to try and persuade people to think about putting themselves forward to join the council. Not to say that they are going to put themselves forward. There is a subtle but very important distinction to be drawn. And it will emerge in a moment, I think, why I say think about it rather than putting themselves forward. The second thing we need to do, Chairman, is that we need to tell people what sort of skills are required to be a member of the parish council. And by skills, I do not mean qualifications. We don't need qualifications to be members of the council. As you say in your paper, we need a cross-diversity of people. Nevertheless, people do have to have certain skills. And you recall, Chairman, on your leave, the Personnel and Standards panel put forward a skills audit. Now, that was applied to councillors who were around the table, plus the 4 who are not here this evening. But in my view, that concept equally applies to prospective candidates or nominees to join the council. So we need to tell people what sort of skills they require in terms of experience and or interest. To cite a very simple but highly pertinent example, to be a member of the parish council, you have to be computer literate. Now, it's obvious to the 12 of us who are on the council and to the clerk, because all our communications are done electronically. But I don't think that everybody in Nettleham will necessarily understand that. So it's incumbent on us to tell them in very simple terms, if you're not computer literate, then don't waste your time and don't waste our time, because you're not suitable. The third objective is that we need to tell people what the commitment of being on the council entails. Now, it involves 1 or 2 parish council meetings per month. It requires attendance at ad hoc meetings. It requires reading of reports and perusal of papers and writing and reading emails. Now, purely out of interest, Mr. Chairman, I've done a log of the time that I've spent since I received this agenda on Thursday morning. As if I was charging a client on a chargeable basis professionally. And I'm running at just over 10 hours at the moment. I should say I'm reviewing the standing orders, which perhaps adds to the time scale. I've factored in this meeting of 3 hours tonight. We also have a personnel and standards meeting on Thursday, plus preparation for it. So I will be somewhere in the region of 12 to 13 hours in 8 working days. Now, I accept, Mr. Chairman, that is not necessarily representative of the month as a whole. But I think we do need to be very frank with people that if they are going to join the parish council and make a constructive contribution to the work of the council, they must be able and willing to contribute in the region of, I would say, about 20 hours a month. If they can't do that, then quite frankly, they should not think about standing. And finally, Mr. Chairman, my last objective is that I'm using your word diversify. I think we do need to attract, if possible, members of the working population within our community. Now, I think I can help with this in that I recall that of my 21 years on the council, the first 15 years, including a 5-year period when I was chairman of the council, during that 15-year period, I worked full-time. So it is perfectly possible to be a member of the parish council and to hold down a full-time job, and if I may say so, a responsible job. But all it comes down to is, do you want to do it? Are you prepared to do it? And I just want to cite one example to underline all the points that I'm making, Mr. Chairman. 3 years ago we had an election, and a certain Roger Sharp got elected to join the parish council. Now, I knew Roger reasonably well through Twinning. He's a highly educated man, had all the skills that would be required to be a member of the parish council, but he had not looked into and had not been told what the commitment would entail. So within 6 weeks of being appointed, he came to see me and said, "I'm sorry, Terry, but I will have to resign from the council because I had not appreciated that you had all these meetings, you had all these commitments, I've got a busy life already and I cannot fit it in." So it is very important that we tell people very clearly from the outset what is involved. We do not want to find a repeat of that situation. This is not about getting bums on seats. It's about getting the right people, and I say that in a very general and I hope not a snobbish way of getting the right people round the table to serve the community. And I think my article certainly will be directed in that way. I hope those are useful thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
They are very useful. Thank you, Terry. No.
95% of what Terry said I can agree with. We should not leave anybody in any doubt. But just as I mentioned to you privately about the apolitical part of your introduction, there is nothing to stop anyone standing on this parish council as a member of a political party. I wouldn't encourage it, but to say otherwise, we could find ourselves in trouble. In the same way, there is a danger in saying you must be computer literate. It would be advisable, it would certainly be a huge advantage, but we must be careful not to say that to people, or else we'll be criticised possibly with certain legal outcomes if we're saying, right, you can stand, but you mustn't do with this, and this.
You must be able to, if you want to communicate in the modern era, you've got to be
I
able
would
to use
agree
it.
with you. I'm just saying we've got to be very careful
I
of
think
how
we
we
just need
phrase
to make
that.
that clear that some people's idea of computer literacy is different to other people's
Yes.
idea.
Yes.
So I think we just need to be clear
Yes.
on what we really mean by that, and
Yeah.
we need to be able to communicate via computer.
But anyone can stand, and we mustn't stand in their
Oh, I see.
way.
Well, the illustrate the point, Mr. Chairman, you're probably an IT expert, Mr. Chairman. People don't need to be IT experts to be members of the Parish
No.
Council. I'm certainly not one.
No, but you can
still
do
have
it.
to be computer literate.
You need to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Angela.
I'd just like to say that I thought the main reason why Roger Sharp decided not to continue was because he was moving out of the parish.
No, not at all.
That's what he said.
That's the way I understood it.
That's what he
And
said.
secondly, I'd like to say this council reflects a similar group that I'm a part of, the governing body, i.e. majority of men. And I don't know how you attract more women to put themselves forward, because they don't.
No, that's a frustration.
Yeah,
We need a diverse representation.
yeah.
It's, Mike.
Yeah, I take Terry's point about being able to hold down a job and come to a parish council meeting as well. But if you're working a building trade or you do something where you work 9 to 5, but if you hold meetings in the day, you can't attend them. So if you want a younger person to come to your job, don't have a man that's working 9 to 5, because you can't do it.
Richard.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with Terry's point about trying to make clear what the commitment is. But we've discussed that in our working group meeting. Where I'm a little bit edgy is the idea of having that skills questionnaire as a kind of screening tool for people that
Yes, I didn't make myself sufficiently clear. What I meant was to explain what sort of skills, what are sort of tasks that are involved in the parish council.
So I think
basically a list of tasks or
Yes.
skills that are required. Basically.
Yes.
So I
Rather
think
than do it, use it as a screening exercise.
No.
Just
so I think if we're suggesting that they're beneficial rather than a requirement,
Yes.
then that's fine.
Any other comments? Sorry, John.
Yes, Joe, I'm just not volunteering, but I'm just reflecting on the time I've been on the parish council, and from that, the advice I think I would give people is that we have never achieved, and I would hope we can, a good gender balance on the parish council. Never, ever. We did at one stage achieve a much better age range balance on the parish council. That was a very long time ago when a lot of us were in our youth, and 5 of us actually stood for the parish council, because at that time the parish council was becoming reflective of the parish council now. A lot of older, retired people who were just aged with the parish council. And we are getting young people into the village. And we've all seen the benefit, if I might say so, of Richard being on the parish council, challenging, questioning, and not from our basis of all this knowledge we've acquired, or prejudice, or whatever you like to call it. So I would very much like to see, if we can, some way of accommodating and encouraging younger people to participate in this parish council, especially ones with children growing up, because we understandably, you might have grandchildren, and I've got 7. You do have a blind spot to the real needs and the current needs. And the parish council, at the end of the day, is here for the whole community. And we might have an age bias in the population. I don't think that necessarily should be reflected on the parish council. Perhaps it's a good thing if it weren't. It's a real issue. When we're doing these articles for Nettleham, we do need to, I take Terry's point, and agree with them, but I do want us, if we can, to measure on this gender and age distribution, it being truly representative of the community. I'm not saying that any of us here, we all do try and represent the community as best we can, but if you're not part of that part of the community, that's all you're doing. You're not reflecting, you're not stating hands-on knowledge. It's a real issue for all local authorities, I think.
Terry.
So may I just respond to one point Councillor Hill made? I deliberately omitted the reference to the word age because we need to be cautious, Mr. Chairman,
We do.
as I'm sure the clerk will advise. It is unlawful to make reference to a person's age for any purpose. So I deliberately omitted that from my
Yeah.
deliberations.
Thank you.
And sex.
Yes.
Yeah. But we need to be mindful of what we're trying, how to improve the numbers in those particular demographics.
That's what I was trying to say. We
Yeah.
should be mindful of what we write, that we're not trying to encourage that.
Right, okay, well thank you for your thoughts on that. Certainly the working party will take that away and give that some further thought. If you'd like to consider being part of the working party, Terry.
No, I'm going to write my article and
that's
of
fine.
course circulate it before it's sent
All
in,
right.
of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on then. To discuss the invitation of the Fire and Rescue and Police Family Day. That's at the end of June, 30th of June. Now, parish councils and their other halves have had or will be getting invitations should they wish, and also family members. Otherwise, the Families' Day is purely for the fire and police forces. So we've got a privileged opportunity should anybody be interested. Basically, I think it's really a case of throwing it out there, and if you're interested, please let Julia know and she'll put your name down on the list. Of course, we'll have to be careful with our data protection.
And the other thing is, if there's any residents you wish, as you see,
Yes,
from
you
the
can bring other
information,
residents
if
with
there's
you.
any residents you wish to invite, you know, they're asking for 50 residents to attend.
A maximum of 50.
So if you
on
can
this
let me know.
ticket.
Generous number, really.
Are we going to publicise that and ask residents to come directly to the offices? Do we
I
have
think it's
capacity to-
invitation by council.
These recommendations that you may have, that you
Yeah.
think that somebody from, you know, the resident village you feel that they, you know, can benefit. If you could let me know, you know, don't leave it like to the mind.
We're all clear now. So
Okay, thank you.
what about locking the back door?
We'll deal with that.
All right. So
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your invitation.
Thank you. Bye bye now.
Good section.
Right. To approve the use of the green for the Nettleham Carnival in July 2018. We discuss the parish council stand at the carnival. All those in favour? Thank you.
Both.
Yes. To approve the use of the green for the Nettleham Scout Group's breakfast on the green in the event of the 12th of May and 29th of September. All in favour? Yes, thank you. So better get through it. Discuss the proposed presentation by Lincs Rivers Trust and Environment Agency on the BEC. Terry would like to speak on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, Mr. Chairman, at the BEC working group, I put forward the possibility of the presentation. I gave the option that it be done to the BEC working group or to the full council. It was the chairman's decision, i.e. the chairman of the council, and John went for the presentation to the council. So, without further ado, I've arranged with the two people concerned, one from the Environment Agency and one from the LRT, Lincolnshire River Trust, and is now to be held on Tuesday the 12th of June at 7:30 here in the large hall, and we'll definitely finish by 9 p.m. Because I promised the two presenters, because obviously they've got to go to work the next day, so I think that's long enough. I can't imagine that it will last that long, to be honest with you. but there we are. I've got a title for it, but it's very brief. It's to consider proposals for an improvement scheme to the Nettleham Beck for amenity purposes. But I am seeing that the two presenters wear another hat on Wednesday, and I will try and extract from them a bit more info, and I will pass that on to the facilities manager who's arranging it, and we'll get some publicity for the event. So that's
Okay,
it.
thank you. Just to clarify on that, we originally did talk about having it as a parish council event, but it seemed, in discussion with the clerk, it seems the more logical thing is just to have it as a public presentation. Hopefully all parish councils will be present to hear what's said about how we can improve one of the major features of our village. But we'll just basically have it as a public meeting public forum rather than this kind of format. I think that was more appropriate.
Well, I just say, Mr. Chairman, that I think it's there's a good opportunity, but I'm not promising. But I certainly think there is an opportunity there to improve the back,
Right.
and I'm hoping that something will come of it.
Thank you. Andrew?
There is somebody working at Rising who's very interested in the back. They are doing research. I wonder whether they should be invited. Lincoln
Sure.
University person.
Yes.
Invite anybody.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the more the merrier. Please.
Are we using all the media to publicise?
Oh yes, we will do.
What I'm thinking is, we've got to get, if Nettleham matters, it's got to be in the next week or two for the June edition. It's going to have an effect. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not something that can wait. So if there's any publicity and graphics, people will read it.
Right. What do you think, Terry?
Well, I'll get what I can
Okay.
to Fred by Monday.
Okay, and we'll
Okay.
get something out. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Right. Moving on then. Consultations. To consider the response to the local government ethical standards consultation survey. I'm sure you've all read it and digested it and are ready to tick all the boxes and tell us what you think. What I was actually going to suggest is that it strikes me that it's logical for us to actually look at this within the standards of HR committee or panel and basically put forward a response on behalf of the parish council. We've got to get this in by the 27th, Friday. We could do that online. We've got a meeting on the 26th. We can do that online in the meeting and get that away. So if you're happy to delegate that to the staff. I thought you might be.
I'm conscious of other people now.
But I think it's something we can whip through fairly quickly if we're doing it on the spot, from what I could see of it. Another one that we've got is we seem to be inundated with consultations.
Everybody in favour of
Oh, sorry. Everybody in favour of that proposal? Thank you. Sorry, rushing ahead. You keep me in order. Good girl. To consider the response of the Linc's waste strategy consultation. As I was about to say, yeah, we seem to be inundated with consultations these days. Whether anybody actually pays any attention to them, I've no idea. But,
I would like to comment on this one.
yes, certainly.
We're going back 30 odd years, when I first got involved with waste collection, I was told it's so inefficient in Lincolnshire because we have one authority collecting the waste and we have one authority disposing of the waste, but never the twain shall meet. It's a lot more expensive that way. If you want to solve a lot of our waste problems, have one authority doing both. Revolutionary, but this comes from officers a long time ago, and I haven't heard a different view since.
What's the council's thoughts regarding the strategy consultation? This has to be in by June. June. So it's not that imminent. Anybody want to take on the mantle of actually looking at it? No? Oh,
I've got enough fish on fire.
Exactly. Or would it be the council's proposal then that we just park that consultation We don't have to participate in every consultation that's put before us.
I was going to
So-
say compulsory.
I'll make a proposal then that we park that consultation and note it.
Yes.
Yes, all in favour?
To note the position.
To note the position. Thank you.
That was all in favour.
All in favour, yeah. Okay, you've got some correspondence before you. Is there anything really of any note in that, Julia? That
No, not really. There was just a letter back from Banks Linc following the advertising, but it's sort of non-committal really, I think.
It was.
And there is the cluster meeting if anybody wishes to attend. The Community Links cluster meeting. If anybody wishes to attend it, to let me know.
Thank you.
So it's just noted.
Just note. Yeah.
Could I draw council's attention to the complaint about agricultural vehicles along because I have notified Council Broadway. But I think of the many points raised, one is certainly a very valid one, and that is the vehicles overrunning the Beanie Block drainage system. There is evidence elsewhere in the country that these things are easily and very badly damaged by overrunning with heavy vehicles. And that is in a crucial area. I think comments have been made to the County Council now about it, and they can take action. And if that drainage system were to fail, it would be very expensive to put right. It would certainly result in flooding in that area. And it's not acceptable for any vehicles to have to run over them. And you can see damage already occurring there as a result of that. So somehow we've got to persuade them not to do it.
To make a decision, this has to be agenda.
Yes, we'll have to make that an agenda item for the next meeting, John, if you want to discuss that.
Well, I don't particularly want to, I just want, I mean we can have it as an agenda item, but I just wanted to draw people's attention to it. They've probably seen the letter in the totality, but that is a very relevant point.
Right.
I've made that
Which
point.
we'd like to
to
make-
It
Council
has been
Broadway.
referred to Jackie and
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear you talking about the
Sorry.
Rouge Lane, the vehicles going up on the curbs.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah,
This was one of the
destroying
letters.
potentially destroying the drainage system.
To speak
If
to,
you'd like to
yeah,
respond to
I
that.
have had a reply, and they say there's actually very little they can do because they would have to catch vehicles going through, and they're not minded to put double yellow lines there because of the way the road is used by the village. It could be put in, it could go into consultation, but then it affects all sorts of things like the carnivals and the co-op, so there's quite a lot of repercussion. And they're saying if we can identify people who are going up on the curb, we could ask them politely. The other thing we could do is try to persuade them to go round, but farmers generally are not going to do that because it's time and it's money. So they have looked at it, and the response wasn't that they could do something. We can't force them not to use the road. If they're taxed, they can use it. If we catch them, we can say, please don't do it, but that's about as far as you can go. It's not a powerful response, I'm afraid. I can pursue it again if
Yeah.
you'd like me to.
It's not very helpful, is it?
Why can't I?
I
can
mean,
certainly try again.
I think our biggest concern is the fact that if it damages that drainage,
That's right.
we've got some serious flood risk potential.
Chairman, if I may come back,
Yeah.
I know it's not within standing rules, but we have found that with Scotland Road, that by going back and back and back, and when
Yeah.
we weren't together, we achieved a considerable change.
Absolutely.
And my instinct now would be to go back on this and express the parish council's
Yeah.
concern, with your permission.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank
Please.
you.
I think just chase the damage point. The
I will.
rest-
Yeah.
the rest
I
is-
will. Yeah, I'll do that now.
Because it'll cost them an awful lot more in the future.
Yeah, it will.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so item 10, councillors' reports, future agenda items. Mike?
No.
No. John?
Yes, on the planning, I'd like us to consider the recently erected additional notices by the co-op on Vicarage Lane side, in addition to the notice, the signs that have been put up adjacent to our parish council notice boards that have still not got planning permission. Notwithstanding that, they've put 2 further notices up on that side, and I think the planning, we should consider that.
Is this
particularly bearing in mind the attitude of the district council towards our notice board and it needing planning permission and being very particular about it. I don't want to debate it now, but I think it's an issue we should deal with.
That's an issue that Angela could take up directly anyway.
I mean, I've got pictures of those signs, those plastic signs.
Yes.
Okay, can we just leave that with you to take that up, Angela?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if it can be on the agenda next time.
So make it on the agenda.
On the planning, so we can hopefully have
Yes.
a report back as to just what they're doing about the existing signs and what they're doing about the ones that have gone up very recently in addition to those.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Janice? No? Angela?
No, that's fine. No, I haven't got anything,
Okay.
thank you.
Richard?
Not an agenda item, but I'm not sure if it's our next meeting, the annual parish council meeting, where we normally review all the policies and procedures.
That's right.
Is it possible that, I mean, those must be in existence now. Could they be sent out earlier than the 5 days in advance of the meeting to give a bit more time to read
Yeah.
them?
They are being reviewed currently by the personal and standards.
I know it's in the minutes for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's
Well,
fine.
following that, we'll send them out electronically.
Just to give a bit more time to work through them. Thank you.
Terry?
Two things, Mr Chairman. Like Councillor Siddall, I was also on the twinning visit to Mulsanne. Although the event was extremely well organised by our French twinners, they did slip up in one material respect, in that they failed to tell Joe that he was going to be required to make a bit of a speech. But I have to say, I think Joe replicated himself extremely well and did the parish council very proud.
Great, thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
He always does.
I shall have to say,
We can rely on it.
I won't bother saying it if he says otherwise. Now, the agenda item, Mr Chairman, I had in mind already before Mr Wilkinson raised this issue, because I've discussed it at the Property Committee. I'd like the item reinstatement of grass verges on Washtide Lane, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Support that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I'd like just to confirm that the deferred one I asked for last month, it will be on, about the database of photography. I've done a report which I've passed to Julia for her comments,
Okay.
because it's on the agenda.
Yep, we can discuss it. Young man?
Looking ahead a little, Facebook page for the parish council.
Okay.
And just to make the point further to Councillor Williams, I am no longer the Mayor of Lincoln.
You're Vice Mayor.
Or indeed, as I was on the last night, the Vice Chairman of it. My wife is convinced, had we still been there, now been rat catcher.
I thought you were chief tree planter.
Oh, well, yeah, no.
You didn't get to plant the tree.
The question was, your other question, it was an instruction really. You are here to represent Nettleham. No. I went, oh. But I did get to put a couple of spadefuls in. It was a bit, that was the only thing that was amiss really, wasn't it?
You put a couple of spadefuls down, just like the Duke. That's impressive.
Indeed.
Well, there you are.
We're about
Duke
to
of
say
Nettleham. All right, thank you.
That's all.
Right.
Opening a road.
Nothing more from me.
Under Nettleham.
You've got enough, don't you?
Date of the next meeting, which will also be the annual parish council meeting, where we discuss all the policies and all that good stuff, and we do the
That's the first 5 minutes, Chairman.
yeah.
I love it when you're enthusiastic.
Yeah, I'm waning a bit now. Where we do all the policies and the committees and all that good stuff. So that's a great evening to look forward to.
Can I ask Chairman, bearing in mind what's just been said, that when we do get to, by Councillor Porter, when we do get it, could Julia do a front piece, just advising of the changes in the documents, because
Yeah.
I think they could well be
Since the last issue.
And
that saves reading the whole lot.
From the Property Committee.
Yeah, I think
There'll be a recommendation coming from the Property Committee of any proposed changes, if any.
that's an
And I
excellent
think
idea.
that would be good
Yeah,
to help
thank
us
you.
there.
Yes,
Thank you.
great idea. Okay, I'm looking for a proposal to exclude the public and press to enable us to have a confidential items matter. No opposed? Yeah, thank you. All in favour? Yes, thank you. So thank you all very much. I'll close the meeting temporarily.